You're lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying that conversation from 3 weeks ago for the 100th time. Your mind is racing through every possible scenario of what could go wrong tomorrow, next week, next year. You know you should stop, but you can't. It's like trying to hold back an ocean with your bare hands. Sound familiar? Well, you're not alone. Millions of people are trapped in the same mental prison. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. Overthinking isn't just a bad habit you picked up somewhere along the way. It's actually a sophisticated survival mechanism that your brain developed thousands of years ago. And it's now completely hijacking your life in ways you probably don't even realize. My name is Alex, and I've spent the last 5 years diving deep into the psychology and neuroscience of overthinking after it nearly destroyed my career, my relationships, and my mental health. What I discovered will completely change how you think about your own mind, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your brain won't stop spinning, and more importantly, what you can do about it. But first, let me tell you what happened to me last Tuesday that made me realize just how insidious this problem really is. I was standing in line at a coffee shop, and the person in front of me ordered a complicated drink. Nothing unusual there, right? But as I watched them fumble with their order, my mind immediately started racing. What if I mess up my order too? What if the barista thinks I'm an idiot? What if there's a long line behind me and everyone gets annoyed? What if I forget my wallet? What if? By the time I reached the counter, I was so flustered that I actually did mess up my order, asked for a drink that didn't exist, and walked away feeling like a complete failure. All because my brain decided to run through every possible disaster scenario for ordering a simple cup of coffee. That's when it hit me. This isn't normal. This is a problem that goes way deeper than just being a worrier. Here's what's really happening in your brain when you overthink, and why understanding this changes everything. Your brain has basically two operating systems. There's the focused network, which handles the task at hand, and there's the default mode network, which is like your brain's screensaver. When you're not actively focused on something, this default mode kicks in, and guess what it loves to do? It loves to ruminate, worry, and replay scenarios over and over again. But here's where it gets interesting. This default mode network was actually incredibly useful for our ancestors. When they had downtime, their brains would automatically scan for potential threats, replay social interactions to learn from them, and plan for future challenges. If you heard a rustling in the bushes, your brain would immediately start generating possible scenarios. Is it a predator? Is it the wind? Should I run or hide? This rapid-fire scenario planning kept our ancestors alive. The problem is we're not living in the wild anymore, but our brains haven't gotten the memo. That same system that helped our ancestors survive is now turning every minor social interaction into a potential threat, every future possibility into a catastrophe, and every decision into a life or death scenario. Your brain is literally trying to protect you by overthinking, but it's using outdated software to navigate a modern world. And this is where most people get it completely wrong. They think overthinking is a choice, that they can just decide to stop doing it. But you can't just turn off a survival mechanism that's been hardwired into your brain for thousands of years. It's like trying to stop your heart from beating by thinking about it. The harder you try to stop overthinking, the more you actually end up thinking about thinking, which creates this vicious cycle that just makes everything worse. But wait, there's more. Recent neuroscience research has revealed something absolutely fascinating about overthinkers. It turns out that people who overthink actually have more active brains in certain regions. The anterior cingulate cortex, which is responsible for error detection and conflict monitoring, is hyperactive in overthinkers. This means your brain is constantly scanning for problems, inconsistencies, and potential threats, even when there aren't any. It's like having a smoke detector that's so sensitive it goes off every time you make toast. Your brain is trying to keep you safe, but it's creating false alarms left and right. And here's the kicker. The more you overthink, the stronger these neural pathways become. It's like wearing a path through a forest. The more you walk the same route, the more defined the path becomes, and the easier it is to automatically take that route again. This is why telling someone to just stop overthinking is not only useless, but actually counterproductive. You're essentially telling them to fight against their own brain's protective mechanisms. It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. The problem isn't willpower. The problem is that your brain has learned to see danger everywhere, and it's trying to protect you the only way it knows how. Now here's something that might surprise you about overthinking. It actually serves 3 hidden psychological functions that most people never realize. First, it gives you the illusion of control. When you can't control what happens in the real world, your brain creates this elaborate mental simulation where you can play out every scenario and feel like you're preparing for anything. It's like a security blanket for your mind. Second, overthinking helps you avoid making decisions. If you're constantly analyzing every possible outcome, you never have to actually choose and risk being wrong. It's a form of analysis paralysis that protects you from the potential pain of making a mistake, but it also prevents you from making any progress at all. Third, and this is the big one, overthinking is often a way of avoiding deeper emotional pain. When you're focused on all the things that could go wrong in the future, you don't have to deal with what's actually bothering you right now. It's like emotional procrastination. Your brain would rather spin in circles about hypothetical problems than face the real issues that are causing you pain. Think about it. When was the last time you were overthinking about something genuinely positive? Probably never. Overthinking is almost always focused on negative possibilities, worst-case scenarios, and potential failures. This isn't an accident. Your brain is biologically wired to pay more attention to negative information because, from an evolutionary perspective, missing a threat could kill you, but missing an opportunity just meant you'd have to find another one. This is called the negativity bias, and it's one of the main reasons why overthinking feels so compelling. Your brain literally gets a small hit of stress hormones every time you imagine a potential problem, which then triggers your problem-solving instincts. It's like getting a tiny adrenaline rush every time you worry about something. No wonder it's so addictive. But here's where things get really interesting. The type of overthinking you do actually reveals a lot about your deeper psychological patterns. Some people are rumination overthinkers, constantly replaying past events and analysing what went wrong. Others are anxiety overthinkers, always focused on future catastrophes and worst-case scenarios. And then there are perfectionist overthinkers, who get stuck in analysis paralysis because they're terrified of making the wrong choice. Each type of overthinking serves a different psychological function and requires a different approach to overcome. But they all share one common thread. They're all attempts to manage uncertainty and maintain a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Your brain hates uncertainty more than almost anything else, and it will create elaborate mental gymnastics to avoid admitting that you can't predict or control everything that happens to you. This is why simply trying to think positive or focus on the good stuff doesn't work for overthinkers. You're not just dealing with negative thoughts. You're dealing with a fundamental intolerance for uncertainty that's been reinforced by years of mental habits. It's like trying to treat a broken arm with a band-aid. You need to address the underlying structure, not just the surface symptoms. And here's something that will blow your mind. Overthinking actually makes you worse at the very thing it's supposed to help you with. When you overthink decisions, you actually make worse choices. When you overthink social interactions, you actually become more socially awkward. When you overthink problems, you actually become less creative at solving them. It's like trying to see more clearly by squinting harder. The effort itself becomes the obstacle. This happens because overthinking activates your brain's threat detection system, which narrows your focus and makes you more reactive. When you're in this state, You can't access the creative, intuitive parts of your brain that actually help you navigate complex situations. You become like a person trying to thread a needle while wearing thick gloves. The harder you try, the more clumsy you become. But here's the thing that gives me hope, and it should give you hope too. Your brain is incredibly adaptable. The same neuroplasticity that allowed your overthinking patterns to become so deeply ingrained also means you can rewire your brain to think differently. It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's absolutely possible. The key is understanding that you're not trying to stop thinking altogether. You're trying to change the quality and direction of your thinking. Instead of getting caught in endless loops of worry and analysis, you can learn to think more strategically, more creatively, and more compassionately. You can train your brain to be curious instead of anxious, to be present instead of always planning for disasters that will probably never happen. This brings us to something crucial that most people miss when they're trying to overcome overthinking: the role of your nervous system. Your thoughts don't exist in a vacuum. They're directly connected to your physiological state. When your nervous system is activated and stressed, your thoughts become more negative, more repetitive, and more catastrophic. When your nervous system is calm and regulated, your thoughts naturally become clearer, more creative, and more balanced. This is why breathing exercises, meditation, and physical movement can be so effective for overthinkers. You're not just trying to change your thoughts, you're trying to change the physiological state that's driving those thoughts. It's like trying to have a calm conversation while someone is playing loud music in the background. First, you need to turn down the volume on your nervous system's alarm bells, and then you can start having more productive internal conversations. Now, let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable: the secondary gains of overthinking. I know that sounds crazy. Who would want to keep doing something that makes them miserable? But here's the truth. Your brain doesn't keep doing things that don't serve some kind of purpose, even if that purpose is hidden from your conscious mind. For many people, overthinking becomes a way to feel productive without actually taking action. You spend hours analysing a problem, turning it over in your mind, considering every angle, and at the end of it all, you feel like you've accomplished something. But you haven't actually moved forward. You've just burned mental energy in circles. It's like running on a treadmill and convincing yourself you're making progress because you're sweating. I see this all the time with people who are stuck in their careers. They'll spend months overthinking whether they should apply for a new job, analysing every possible outcome, researching company cultures, imagining worst-case scenarios, but they never actually update their resume or send out applications. The overthinking becomes a substitute for action, allowing them to avoid the real fear of rejection or failure. There's also a social component to overthinking that most people don't recognize. In our culture, being a deep thinker is seen as a positive trait. People who overthink often get praised for being thoughtful, analytical, or conscientious. They become the person everyone goes to for advice because they've thought through every possible scenario. But this social reinforcement can actually trap you in the overthinking cycle because you start to derive your identity and self-worth from your ability to analyze and worry. I remember talking to a woman who told me she was proud of being a worrier because it meant she cared about her family. She had convinced herself that if she stopped worrying about her children, she would be a bad mother. But what she didn't realize is that her constant worrying was actually making her less present with her kids and less able to enjoy the moments that really mattered. Her overthinking had become a form of emotional insurance policy that was bankrupting her actual relationship with her family. This is where things get really twisted. Your brain starts to believe that overthinking is protecting you from bad things happening. It's like a mental superstition. You think, if I worry about this enough, I can prevent it from happening. Or, if I analyse this situation thoroughly enough, I'll be able to control the outcome. But that's not how reality works. Your thoughts don't have magical powers to prevent bad things from happening or to control other people's behaviour. In fact, overthinking often creates the very problems it's trying to prevent. When you're constantly analysing social interactions, you become more self-conscious and awkward in social situations. When you're always worrying about making mistakes at work, you become more anxious and actually more likely to make errors. When you're overthinking your relationship, you become more needy and insecure, which pushes your partner away. It's like trying to steady a wobbling table by shaking it more vigorously. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Overthinking is often a symptom of unprocessed emotions and unmet needs. When you can't express anger directly, it comes out as rumination about how someone wronged you. When you can't tolerate uncertainty, it comes out as anxiety about future possibilities. When you can't accept that you're not in control, it comes out as analysis paralysis. This is why traditional cognitive approaches to overthinking often fall short. They focus on changing the thoughts, but they don't address the underlying emotional drivers. It's like trying to stop a river by putting up a dam downstream while ignoring the source of the water. The pressure just builds up until it finds another way to flow. Let me give you a perfect example of this. I worked with a guy who couldn't stop overthinking his dating life. He would analyse every text message, every interaction, every possibility of what could go wrong. Traditional advice would tell him to just be more positive or stop caring so much. But when we dug deeper, we discovered that his overthinking was actually protecting him from the vulnerability of genuine connection. He had been hurt badly in a previous relationship, and his brain had learned that if he could just think through every scenario, he could avoid being hurt again. Once he understood this, everything changed. He wasn't trying to fix his thinking. He was trying to heal his capacity for emotional intimacy. The overthinking was just the symptom. The real issue was his fear of being vulnerable and potentially getting hurt again. When he started addressing that deeper fear, the overthinking naturally began to diminish. This is the key insight that most people miss. Overthinking is rarely about the thing you're thinking about. It's about your relationship with uncertainty, your tolerance for discomfort, and your ability to be present with whatever is actually happening right now. When you try to control your thoughts directly, you're fighting the wrong battle. Think about it this way. Your thoughts are like clouds in the sky. You can't control what clouds appear or how they move, but you can change your relationship to them. You can learn to observe them without getting caught up in them. You can practice letting them pass through your awareness without attaching to them or believing they're telling you the truth about reality. This is where mindfulness becomes incredibly powerful, but not in the way most people think. Mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts or achieving some Zen-like state of mental emptiness. It's about developing the capacity to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. It's about creating space between you and your thinking patterns so you can choose how to respond rather than automatically reacting. But here's the thing that nobody tells you about mindfulness. It's not just about sitting quietly and focusing on your breath. That's just one tool in a much larger toolkit. Real mindfulness is about bringing conscious awareness to all aspects of your experience. Your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, and your behavioral patterns. It's about becoming curious about your own mind rather than being at war with it. When you start observing your overthinking patterns with curiosity instead of judgment, something remarkable happens. You begin to see the patterns, the triggers, the underlying fears and needs that are driving the mental loops. You start to understand your own psychological landscape in a way that allows you to navigate it more skillfully. For example, you might notice that you always start overthinking after certain types of social interactions. Or you might realize that your overthinking gets worse when you're tired or stressed. Or you might discover that you use overthinking as a way to avoid making decisions because you're afraid of making the wrong choice. These insights give you power because you can't change what you're not aware of. This awareness also helps you recognize the difference between productive thinking and overthinking. Productive thinking has a clear purpose and moves you toward a solution or decision. Overthinking is repetitive, circular, and keeps you stuck in the same mental loops without any forward progress. Learning to distinguish between these two types of thinking is crucial for breaking free from the overthinking trap. But awareness alone isn't enough. You also need to develop new neural pathways that support healthier thinking patterns. This is where the concept of neuroplasticity becomes your best friend. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. Every time you choose a different response to your overthinking triggers, you're literally building new neural pathways that make it easier to respond differently in the future. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They try to go from overthinking to not thinking at all, which is like trying to go from sprinting to a dead stop. Your brain rebels against this approach because it interprets the sudden silence as a threat. Instead, you need to redirect your thinking energy into more productive channels. Think of it like this. If you have a river that's flooding your basement, you don't try to stop the river altogether. You redirect it into a better channel. Your brain has all this mental energy that's currently being wasted on repetitive worry loops. The goal isn't to eliminate that energy, but to channel it into something that actually serves you. This is why distraction techniques often fail for chronic overthinkers. You're not addressing the underlying need your brain has to process and problem solve. You're just trying to ignore it, which creates internal resistance. It's like trying to ignore a crying baby. The crying doesn't stop just because you're pretending not to hear it. But here's something fascinating that researchers discovered about the overthinking brain. It actually has enhanced pattern recognition abilities. Overthinkers are often incredibly good at seeing connections, anticipating problems, and noticing details that others miss. The problem isn't that you're thinking too much. It's that you're thinking about the wrong things in the wrong way. Your brain is like a high-performance sports car that's been stuck in first gear. It has incredible capabilities, but it's not being used efficiently. When you learn to harness your analytical abilities and direct them toward constructive purposes, you can actually turn your overthinking tendency into a superpower. I learned this lesson the hard way during my own recovery from chronic overthinking. I spent months trying to quiet my mind, practicing meditation, doing breathing exercises, and getting frustrated when my thoughts wouldn't just stop. Then I had a breakthrough moment when I realized I was approaching this completely wrong. Instead of trying to stop thinking, I started asking myself better questions. Instead of, what if everything goes wrong? I began asking, what's the most likely outcome here? Instead of, why did this happen to me? I started asking, what can I learn from this? Instead of, how can I avoid making mistakes? I began asking, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? The shift was subtle but profound. I wasn't fighting my brain's natural tendency to analyze and process. I was just giving it better material to work with. It's like the difference between feeding your mind junk food versus giving it nutritious fuel. The same digestive system that makes you sick with processed food can make you incredibly healthy with the right nutrients. This brings us to something crucial. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your thinking. Most overthinkers are trapped in what I call victim questions. Questions that assume you're powerless and focus on what's wrong or what might go wrong. These questions generate anxiety, rumination, and helplessness because they're designed to find problems, not solutions. But when you shift to what I call creator questions, questions that assume you have agency and focus on possibilities and solutions, your entire mental landscape changes. Your brain starts looking for opportunities instead of threats, solutions instead of problems, and actions instead of worries. Here's the thing that blew my mind when I first understood it. Your brain is always answering questions, whether you're consciously asking them or not. When you're overthinking, you're unconsciously asking questions like, what could go wrong? Why am I not good enough? How can I avoid being hurt? And your brain, being the loyal servant it is, goes out and finds evidence to answer those questions. But what if you started asking different questions? What if you asked, what's working well in my life? How can I grow from this experience? What would courage look like in this situation? Your brain would start finding evidence to answer those questions instead. This isn't just positive thinking or wishful thinking. This is strategic thinking. You're literally programming your brain to look for different types of information and to process experiences through a different lens. It's like switching from black and white television to color. You're not changing reality, but you're changing how you perceive and interact with reality. Now let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable: the relationship between overthinking and perfectionism. These two often go hand in hand, and understanding this connection is crucial for breaking free from both patterns. Perfectionism isn't really about having high standards. It's about having impossible standards that protect you from ever having to face the vulnerability of being imperfect. When you're a perfectionist, you can always find reasons why something isn't good enough yet, why you need to think about it more, why you need to analyze it from every angle before you act. This creates a perfect storm for overthinking because you're constantly looking for the one right answer, the perfect solution, the foolproof plan. But here's the reality. In most situations, there is no perfect answer. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of trade-offs. When you demand perfection from an imperfect world, you get stuck in analysis paralysis. I see this all the time with people who can't make decisions. They'll research every option, create pros and cons lists, ask everyone for advice, and still feel paralyzed. They're not actually looking for information at this point. They're looking for certainty. They want someone to guarantee that their choice will work out perfectly. And since no one can provide that guarantee, they remain stuck. The antidote to perfectionism isn't lowering your standards. It's changing your relationship to imperfection. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, you start seeing them as data. Instead of viewing uncertainty as a threat, you start viewing it as an adventure. Instead of demanding guarantees, you start developing confidence in your ability to handle whatever happens. This shift requires what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt your thinking when faced with new information or changing circumstances. Overthinkers often have very rigid thinking patterns. They get locked into one way of seeing a situation and can't consider alternative perspectives. But cognitive flexibility is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. Every time you catch yourself in a rigid thought pattern and consciously consider other possibilities, you're building this mental muscle. Every time you challenge your assumptions or look at a situation from a different angle, you're increasing your cognitive flexibility. Here's a practical example of how this works. Let's say you're overthinking a presentation you have to give at work. The rigid thinking pattern might be, I have to be perfect or everyone will think I'm incompetent. But with cognitive flexibility, you might consider, most people are more focused on their own concerns than judging me. Or, even if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Or, this is an opportunity to share something valuable, not a performance to be judged. Yeah, each of these alternative perspectives opens up new possibilities for how you might approach the situation. Instead of being paralyzed by the fear of imperfection, you can focus on preparation, connection with your audience, or the value you're providing. This is where the rubber meets the road in overcoming overthinking. You need to develop what I call meta-awareness, awareness of your awareness. You need to become conscious of when you're slipping into overthinking patterns and have specific strategies to redirect your mental energy. The first step is learning to recognize your personal overthinking triggers. These are the situations, emotions, or thoughts that tend to send you spiraling into analysis loops. Common triggers include making decisions, social interactions, uncertain outcomes, criticism, and transitions or changes. Once you know your triggers, you can develop specific strategies for each one. For decision-making triggers, you might set decision deadlines and stick to them. For social triggers, you might practice self-compassion techniques. For uncertainty triggers, you might focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. But here's the key. These strategies need to be practiced when you're not in the middle of an overthinking episode. It's like learning to swim. You don't wait until you're drowning to practice the techniques. You develop the skills when you're calm and safe, so they're available when you need them. This is why I'm such a big advocate for what I call mental rehearsal. Just like athletes visualize their performance before a competition, you can mentally rehearse how you'll handle your overthinking triggers. You imagine the situation, notice the urge to overthink, and then practice implementing your chosen strategy. The more you rehearse these new responses, the more automatic they become. Eventually, you develop what psychologists call implementation intentions, if-then plans that help you respond more skillfully to challenging situations. If I notice myself starting to overthink this decision, then I'll set a timer for 10 minutes of focused thinking and then make a choice. These implementation intentions are incredibly powerful because they take the decision-making out of the moment. When you're in the middle of an overthinking spiral, your judgment is compromised. You're not thinking clearly, and you're more likely to make choices based on anxiety rather than wisdom. But if you've pre-decided how you'll handle these situations, you can implement your plan even when your thinking is cloudy. Now let's address something that might be holding you back: the fear of what will happen if you stop overthinking. Many people are secretly afraid that if they stop analysing every situation to death, they'll make terrible decisions or miss important details. This fear keeps them trapped in the overthinking cycle because they believe it's protecting them from disaster. But here's what actually happens when you stop overthinking. You start making better decisions, not worse ones. You become more intuitive, more creative, and more responsive to what's actually happening rather than what you imagine might happen. Your relationships improve because you're more present and less caught up in your own mental drama. You have more energy because you're not constantly burning mental fuel on repetitive worry loops. The fear of stopping overthinking is like the fear of taking off training wheels. You're afraid you'll fall, but actually, the training wheels were slowing you down and making you less stable. Once you remove them, you can ride faster, smoother, and with more confidence. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it's not a linear process. You'll have good days and bad days, moments of clarity and moments of confusion. That's completely normal and expected. The goal isn't to achieve some perfect state of mental calm. It's to develop a healthier relationship with your thoughts and a more flexible approach to life's challenges. Remember, your brain developed these overthinking patterns for a reason. They served a purpose at some point in your life, even if they're not serving you now. Instead of fighting against these patterns or judging yourself for having them, you can appreciate them for what they were, your brain's attempt to keep you safe, while also choosing to evolve beyond them. This compassionate approach to change is crucial because shame and self-criticism only fuel the overthinking cycle. When you judge yourself for overthinking, you create more mental activity, more emotional turmoil, and more reasons to analyze and worry. But when you approach your patterns with curiosity and kindness, you create space for genuine transformation. The path forward isn't about eliminating thinking or achieving some Zen-like state of mental emptiness. It's about developing discernment, the ability to distinguish between helpful thinking and harmful thinking, between productive analysis and destructive rumination, between genuine intuition and anxiety-driven catastrophizing. As you develop this discernment, you'll start to notice something fascinating. The thoughts that feel most urgent and important when you're overthinking are often the least relevant to your actual situation. It's like having a smoke detector that goes off every time you make toast. The alarm feels real and urgent, but it's not actually indicating danger. This is where the practice of what I call thought triage becomes invaluable. Just like emergency room doctors quickly assess which patients need immediate attention and which can wait, you can learn to quickly categorize your thoughts. Some thoughts deserve your full attention and analysis. Others are just mental noise that can be acknowledged and released. And some thoughts are actually distortions that need to be challenged rather than entertained. The key is learning to ask yourself, is this thought helping me solve a real problem, or is it just creating imaginary problems? Real problems have concrete solutions and clear next steps. Imaginary problems are vague, endless, and seem to multiply the more you think about them. For example, thinking, I need to prepare for tomorrow's meeting by reviewing my notes and organizing my key points is productive thinking. But thinking, what if I say something stupid in the meeting and everyone realizes I don't know what I'm doing and I get fired and can't pay my bills and end up homeless, is overthinking. The first thought leads to action. The second leads to anxiety spirals. Here's something that might surprise you. Your overthinking patterns are actually quite predictable. Most people have the same 3 or 4 mental loops that they cycle through repeatedly. Once you identify your specific patterns, you can develop targeted strategies for each one. Maybe you're a what-if overthinker who constantly imagines worst-case scenarios. Your antidote might be reality-checking questions like, what's the most likely outcome here? Or, what evidence do I have that this worst-case scenario will actually happen? Or perhaps you're a why ruminator who gets stuck replaying past events and analysing what went wrong. Your strategy might be shifting from, why did this happen, to what can I learn from this? Or how can I handle this differently next time? The beauty of understanding your patterns is that you can interrupt them before they gain momentum. It's like knowing the early warning signs of a storm. You can take shelter before it hits rather than getting caught in the middle of it. But here's where most people stumble. They try to use logic and rationality to fight emotional and intuitive processes. Your overthinking isn't usually based on rational analysis. It's based on emotional fears and unmet psychological needs. This is why simply telling yourself, that's not logical, doesn't work. You're bringing a calculator to a feelings fight. Instead, you need to address the emotional drivers underneath the overthinking. Are you afraid of being rejected? Learn to tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty in relationships. Are you worried about failing? Develop a healthier relationship with mistakes and imperfection. Are you anxious about the future? Practice grounding yourself in the present moment. This emotional work is often the missing piece that keeps people stuck in overthinking loops, even when they intellectually understand what's happening. Your brain isn't just processing information, it's trying to manage emotions, meet psychological needs, and maintain a sense of safety and control. One of the most powerful tools I've discovered for this emotional work is what I call befriending your overthinking. Instead of seeing your overthinking as an enemy to be defeated, you can start seeing it as a part of yourself that's trying to help, even if it's not helping very effectively. When you notice yourself starting to overthink, instead of fighting it, try saying something like, I noticed that the part of me that wants to keep me safe is getting activated right now. It's trying to protect me by analysing every possible outcome. I appreciate that it cares about my well-being, but I don't need this level of protection right now. This approach acknowledges the positive intention behind the overthinking while still choosing to respond differently. It's like having a conversation with an overprotective friend who means well, but is being a bit overwhelming. As you practice this more compassionate approach, you'll start to notice that your overthinking naturally begins to decrease. When you stop fighting with your thoughts, they lose their power over you. When you stop feeding the anxiety with resistance, it begins to starve. The final piece of this puzzle is learning to trust yourself. Most overthinking stems from a fundamental lack of self-trust. You don't trust your ability to handle whatever happens, so your brain tries to prepare for every possible scenario. You don't trust your intuition, so you overanalyze every decision. You don't trust that you're resilient, so you try to avoid any situation that might be challenging. But here's the truth. You're more capable than you think. You've handled difficult situations before, and you can handle them again. You've made decisions with incomplete information, and most of them turned out fine. You've survived uncertainty, disappointment, and setbacks. Your track record for getting through tough times is actually 100% so far. Building self-trust isn't about convincing yourself that you'll never make mistakes or that everything will always work out perfectly. It's about developing confidence in your ability to navigate whatever comes your way. It's about knowing that even if you make a mistake, you can learn from it and recover. Even if things don't go according to plan, you can adapt and find a new path forward. This self-trust is built through action, not through thinking. Every time you make a decision, without endless analysis, you prove to yourself that you can trust your judgment. Every time you handle a challenging situation, without falling apart, you build evidence of your resilience. Every time you take action despite uncertainty, you strengthen your confidence in your ability to navigate life's complexities. The journey out of overthinking isn't about reaching some perfect destination where you never have anxious thoughts or worry about anything. It's about developing a new relationship with your mind, one where you're the driver, not the passenger. It's about learning to use your powerful, analytical abilities as tools rather than letting them use you. Your overthinking brain is like a Ferrari engine. It's incredibly powerful, but it needs the right driver to reach its potential. When you learn to direct that mental horsepower toward productive purposes, when you develop the skills to navigate uncertainty with confidence, when you build trust in your ability to handle whatever comes your way, that's when everything changes. You stop living in your head and start living in your life. You stop preparing for disasters that will probably never happen and start creating experiences that bring you joy. You stop analyzing every interaction to death and start connecting authentically with the people around you. This transformation is possible for you, not because you're special or because you have some unique gift, but because you're human. And humans are remarkably adaptable creatures. The same neuroplasticity that created your overthinking patterns can create new patterns of clarity, confidence, and peace. The brain that learned to see danger everywhere can learn to see opportunity everywhere. The mind that got trapped in worry loops can learn to flow with life's natural rhythms. The person who felt controlled by their thoughts can learn to be the conscious director of their mental experience. Your overthinking isn't a life sentence. It's not a character flaw or a permanent limitation. It's simply a learned pattern that can be unlearned, a mental habit that can be replaced with healthier habits, a survival mechanism that can be updated for modern life. The key is to start where you are, with what you have right now. You don't need to wait until you have more willpower or until your life is less stressful. You don't need to read more books or take more courses. You have everything you need to begin changing your relationship with your thoughts right now. Start small. The next time you catch yourself overthinking, try one simple technique. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself one better question. Practice 1 moment of self-compassion. These small actions, repeated consistently, will gradually rewire your brain and transform your mental experience. Remember, you didn't learn to overthink overnight, and you won't unlearn it overnight either. But with patience, practice, and compassion for yourself, you can break free from the mental prison that's been holding you back. You can reclaim your peace of mind, your confidence, and your ability to live fully in the present moment. The overthinking stops when you stop believing that your thoughts are telling you the truth about reality and start recognizing them as just mental events that come and go like clouds in the sky. The freedom you're seeking isn't found in having the perfect thoughts. It's found in knowing that you are not your thoughts, and you always have the power to choose how you respond to them. Your journey to mental freedom starts now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when your life is perfect. Now, take that first step and trust that each step forward is building the foundation for the peaceful, confident, present moment life you deserve.